we go.
Professor,
Ah,
how are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm fine.
Can you see us?
Yes, I can. I've got a nice big screen and everything is all lit up here. Can you, I'm assuming you can see me.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
let's see.
Oh, look at those smiles. It's the end of the day. The curtain's coming down. Either they're overjoyed to start or hysteria has already begun.
Well, we're actually very interested. Well, let me introduce Professor Poole briefly and who he is and how he ended up and why I asked him to speak. I've known Professor Poole for almost right now, what, 2 decades? And
Mm,
about.
mm.
He's been a very dear colleague, friend, mentor. We work together and still work together. And so the topic that I've asked, I consider Professor Poole as one of America's intellectuals. And the question that arises that why should leaders, this Professor Poole, this class is on leadership, and Professor Poole used to be a professor here, was a chief financial officer, has extensive corporate and consulting life, and right now resides in Memphis, Tennessee. He's a professor at Memphis University Business School, and additionally, he consults here in Virginia, in Williamsburg. He picks up the beach cases, which he likes, and does a lot of interesting things. Was a former trustee, or maybe current, of Bentley University. And so, Professor Poole, this class is on leadership. And so, as we study business leaders, political leaders, other leaders, the question arises, why should the new generation read books? Right now, all we have is an iPhone, and if you go on website, the CNN will summarize the news in one word, such as bad or good, and then they give you a video clip. So the question is, should really managers or leaders or people who would like to lead other people be competent enough and read books, or whether leadership and reading books are both related?
Well, my instructions are to talk for no more than 10 minutes and turn this thing over to questions, or he will sort of morph into my office or my study and beat me up, and I don't want that. So, folks, buckle up. You're living in a world of exceptional and difficult velocity. You already know that. Change itself hits you constantly. The network, the business world, none of this stops. It's now 24/7. And you have to take a look at what are some of the top problems in the world. The top is organized crime, the largest single most successful decentralized capitalist enterprise on earth is the 7 to 8 trillion dollar annual tithe to organized crime, and the whole system runs on trust. And you could say, well, trust, I trust that you won't double cross me or I'll kill you and your family and everybody that knows you. Sort of creates a level of trust that is very unusual, but that's how it runs. If you then look at some other problems you all are facing, income distribution is now so difficult, so polarized. There has never in modern history been a situation where 3 to 5% of the population controls 99% of the wealth. The problem with that isn't ideological. The problem with that is that no society in 5,000 years has ever survived it. So here we are. All you want to do is get out of school and get a job and pay the bills and pay off your student loans. And I'm talking about the upcoming apocalypse. Now, let's take a look at reading. This turned out to be tough. I spent a lot of time on this. I'm going to get you for this, Dr. Ivanov. This is really, really difficult.
Well, enjoy it. And the question is, what did you learn by reading books?
Got it right here. I actually reduced it to about 8 statements. Ready? Should you still read? Yes. Ignorance is your greatest enemy, your greatest. 2, people have become accustomed to following people who tell them what they want to hear and berate those who tell them what they need to hear. Look at your political estate. Media is a narrow, shallow, biased form of information. If all of your sources of knowledge are from a newspaper, you live in a very dark place. Professionals, for professionals, examine facts and circumstances, then draw informed conclusions. What do you think teaches you how to do that, other than Dr. Ivanov? 5, sheep do not read, but shepherds do. So you got an interesting decision to make. The butcher knows exactly where to take the pig. The pig doesn't read the sign. Guess what? Bacon. 6, what do you wish to be? Is non-reading what you want for your children? 7, your greatest long-term strength is the power to raise questions. It's your greatest asset, your greatest strength. And through that is your ability to articulate a well-formed opinion. Twitter, the internet, iPads, iPhones, none of that will give you that capability. And last but not least, if you don't read, now this is for those of you in any kind of management and business who believes this is what you wish to do. If you don't read, be assured that your competition will. If you don't read, guarantee you're going to be in the second tier. Now, what did I learn? It's as easy. It's a very few words. There are about 10 of them. 1, discipline. It really takes discipline not to watch Netflix and pick up a book. I love science fiction, but not in books. Professionalism. You have to learn what you need to know to excel in your field. Objectivity. That's not going to come from listening to either CNN or Fox News. It isn't. You have to have an omnidirectional input process. Compassion. Who knew? If you take the time to read of what other people go through anywhere on the planet, not to mention just in your neighborhood, your ability to internalize, really internalize compassion increases. 5, you will fuel your own intense curiosity. And if you have siblings, friends, significant others, families, and children, they will emulate you. If you choose to be ignorant, be clear, it is a choice. 6, self-confidence. If you've read many different things, even in your own interest area, you don't have to read stuff that you hate, except textbooks. But your confidence goes up when you can reference things. And somebody else is saying, well, I saw it on Facebook. Yes, Facebook has become the divorce attorney's best friend. And the divorce attorneys, why are they on Facebook? They're reading what you were dumb enough to write. Okay, 7, knowledge and understanding only comes from interaction with people, assuming you have a basis to listen to what they say. Reading helps you with that basis. And last but not least, faith and empowerment. Whether it is Judaic, Christian, Muslim, the tenets of faith that you believe, whatever they may be, New Age, the Force, it's in text. Very few people have read the scriptures written or translated from the ancient languages. The last sets were done in the very early 1800s. And when you read those words, whether it is you're reading the New Testament, the Old Testament, or elements of the Quran, you will find tremendous power in the flow of those words. They do not read like a current Bible. They read something else, something of profound depth. So if you have that going for you, you can tackle a lot of things. You can get through a finance class, so you might not think so, but you actually will. You can survive one of my classes. And that's all I have to say. And yes, I'm going to send an email to Dr. Ivanov with these points, because they only occupy like 2 pages in big print. But it took a day to write it, so I expect you better read it since I took a day to write it. So. Now, I'm done, Sir Dr. I. It's all up to you folks. How would you like to proceed? And I will try my best to answer whatever questions I can.
Well, Professor Poole, thank you very much. I think this is quite profound. And I know, thank you. And now we have a special chair. It's a question chair. We call it a hot chair. And who would like to be first? Yeah, come on up. So make a line and come on up into the hot chair and please ask loudly.
Anybody coming?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
If they don't come, they get an assignment to write a paper.
Oh, no, the stampede is on, you know.
Okay, and yeah, briefly say who you are and just come on in. Yeah, over there.
Oh. Just talking to Mike.
Yeah, and just speak into the mic, yes.
Okay. Hello, Dr. Poole.
Hello, ma'am. How are you?
I'm
Just
fine.
Mr. Poole, not a PhD. I worked very hard for a very long time in industry. He's going to kill me for that. But go on.
Okay, how do you know how when some people have writer's block, there's a such thing as reader's block. Like you get a book, you get it in front of you, but you're not interested in it, like reading the Bible. What are some ways you can do?
Okay, go ahead.
What are some ways that you can clear your mind to enjoy reading books? Because I think that's the problem. People just don't like, they fathom the idea of having books in front of them and reading them.
One of the hard things to do is isolate time. Have a place where you can read, even if it's the closet with a bare light bulb. I had that when I was in college. That was all I had for a reading room. It was wonderful. You have to be in a space where you could read anything, and then just start with something, that you might like, and right beside it have the homework assignment you have to read to pass the class. Most of the starting is stopping all of the external noise around you. People are so used to having this around and this around. They're off right now. That it's very hard to isolate. Your generation, people basically right now, 27 and younger, have never been disconnected from the web. From the age of half a year on, you have been connected. So the idea of shutting down to pick up a book will either send you to drinking or it will send you into a nervous breakdown at the minute. But you have to isolate a space. Go somewhere where you cannot be distracted for 10 minutes, half an hour, whatever it takes, and start with something you enjoy or want to follow, even if it's just a newspaper.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck.
More people? Yeah, just come on up. Yeah, just come on up. Wait, we don't have. Yeah, we don't have. Yeah, they're coming, Darryl.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So let's. Yeah, and then Edwin next. Yeah, come on up. And also, guys, say your name and speak loud.
Okay, hello?
Good afternoon, Bishop.
Good. Yeah, good evening. I am Brian Baker, and my question is, earlier you spoke about religion, and I was wondering about how um, the King James Version of the Bible was different compared to the original version of the Bible, which featured the Code of Ma'at. And I
Uh,
and hello, I just got reaction from you. And I was wondering, since the King James Version, since the scriptures were rewritten, did that actually change the overall values of how people feel about religion and how some cultures use religion not as a positive thing, but really a negative thing? And,
hmm
and I was wondering if, since those scriptures and African scriptures and several other scriptures that were important were deleted from the original Bible, did that make a difference on the way we feel about religion today?
It cannot help but influence it. It cannot help. I have two Bibles written prior to the 1850s that have this kind of very great depth. I also have a number of other reference works on religion. There is a difference between religion and faith.
It's 5 o'clock.
Oh, that's my computer. It is, it's here. You know, there's a difference between religion and faith. Religion is an organized approach. Faith resides within you. You can find people of great faith who've only read a King James. You can find people who have read King James until they have walked into an Oxford book translation, which has all the books known to exist, and only 15% of the Bible still exists. And when you read those words, you're reading much closer to the actual translation of very specific words between Aramaic, Latin, Hebrew, and Greek. This does not happen when you have a King James Version, which was specifically written to create a standard in English approved by, guess who? King James. Very different, very different.
Okay.
Great question.
Thank you.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, just speak into that thing.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
How are you? My name is Bintu Kuyate. Um,
Ma'am.
you earlier you also spoke about the transition, especially with this generation and being so linked into the internet that being tangible or shutting off and bringing a book it's different. It's a hard transition. Have you in your studies also seen or read or shared experiences with others of the transitions of going from an oral historian society into a text-based society?
Oh, yes, actually. Oral histories, actually, if you look at that wall, there are three walls like that in my home. Toward the grandfather clock,
Mm-hmm.
way back, there are several written texts of pure oral histories. Pure oral histories. We lost a lot of the nuance when we shifted from oral history to textbooks, or text, as you would call it. One of the toughest things and why I say you need to read. Let me give you an example of oral that does not translate well into text. Many, many people tell you what they believe the Constitution says. They're waving the Constitution, and it says in the Constitution. Well, 10 years ago, I found out that most people who were waving the Constitution hadn't read it. That was quite a surprise. I'd always assumed the opposite. Have no idea what it really says. Have no idea what's in the Declaration of Independence. The Constitution has some peculiarities. One, the United States has never outlawed letters of marque or state piracy. Who knew? Now we get to your question about whether the oral translations lose in the histories. What they lose when they hit a book is the context of the culture that had the oral tradition. There is context around. There's way in which people lived. There's way in which people thrived. There's way in which people overcame adversities. That often is lost in more of the modern translations. They don't carry the context of what happened or why. Those that are good at this are called annotated texts, such as reading an annotated version of Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. The notations around which Dickens wrote occupy more space than the text of the book. So annotated books tend to try to recreate what would have been part of the oral tradition. So much gets lost because the oral does not translate. We're trying to preserve that in my family down in Memphis, and that's just a matter of recording conversations, finding all the old documents and the original letters people sent back and forth that had nothing to do with email. And now that occupies one file cabinet and two big boxes because we must preserve the context. Is that sort of but if I wasn't reading any of these things, oh well, I'd never know.
Thank you very much.
More than welcome.
Who's next? Come on up to this. Why not?
Hi, good evening, sir.
Ma'am.
My name is Angela, and I was listening to you speak about, in the beginning, you spoke about the 3% having most of the wealth, I guess, in the entire world or this country.
World.
Okay. So I wanted to know how you relate reading to these people having the major wealth in the country and controlling everything, basically influencing everything that happens in this system. I believe a lot of this it is not by people not reading, but based on a lot of the wealth came from piracy. And I wanted to know, how do you think that by people reading more that they could overcome some of the injustices in this country in particular?
In this country alone, we're listening to people who tell you what you want to hear and now dominates asking questions. That's a very serious problem. However, I have something here for you. In 1945, Dr. Gordon Edie said, if they don't stand for something, they will fall for everything. In 1963, Malcolm X said, a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. If you haven't established your own basis of facts, you have no way of combating people who are just broadcasting whatever they wish to say to whomever wishes to see it or hear it. You have to decide what is important, and you have to be prepared to back it up.
Right. I
So I
believe
can
that.
make an immediate transition into dealing with the 3 to 5% that control the global wealth. That didn't happen overnight, and it can't be settled overnight unless we have an international catastrophe. So it's sort of an incomplete answer. But being aware that these things exist, when I talk to senior executives, I ask them, what do you want your organizations to stand for? What do you want those organizations to do? So I tackle it one-on-one. I have no ability to affect the national arena, per se. But if people don't read, if they pay no attention, you have where we are now. The issue is responsibility, and we can't change that en masse. That's an internal, I find that to be an internal process. If you become accountable and feel you are responsible, you will take actions on those things that cross your desk because you can.
Do you believe that the percentages of wealth will change in a certain period of time of the people who hold all the wealth? Think that more people will begin to have a piece of the pie, so for to say, than those of just a small percentage. Because I
Yes,
think
but
the
I
system
don't have,
is set up where they have so much influence that it will be a very small chance of that happening.
I think it'll happen, but I don't have a timetable. This is why. You have 7.2 billion people on Earth, and you have 900 million in absolute poverty. The system cannot stand. But do I have a sense of what time frame? A major global catastrophe will change a lot right quick. An atomic bomb going off in the wrong place will collapse much of the financial infrastructure and everybody will get bombed back. These are not theoretical events any longer. But can I give you a timeline? I don't have it. But I do know now, when you have major tsunamis, major earthquakes, increasing by 30% every 2 to 3 years, you're about due for cataclysm on a spectacular scale that says this will have to be redone. You could collapse sections of the economy faster than any social order ever could. I don't know what to do about that, and I could give you no date certain.
I agree with you that it would take a major catastrophe for the greedy to understand that wealth needs to be distributed among everyone.
Yes. And will that happen? Yes.
Thank
The
you.
question is, once you get it, are you
Hold on,
gonna give
Alfred.
it
We
up?
have rules. I'm sorry, Alfred. You have to come back here and Edwin is
He can go pick up. He doesn't.
Okay. So you have to come here and speak into that thing. Edwin, go ahead. Alfred, if you want to ask a question, come back next.
Okay.
Speak into this thing. Hello, Professor Poole.
Sir.
My name is Edwin Woodley, and I would like to say, number one, thank you for coming. While I totally get the question and the premise of the question, why should we read, especially with the points that you presented, and I totally agree with it. However, I don't see the challenge with the why should we read. I see the challenge more so with how do you get people to read? Because clearly with some folks, there's a disconnect. They just don't want to read. And while they may want to say, yes, I want it for disciplinary reasons and I want it for some of the other reasons that you presented, but how do you get people to that point where they want to read? And that's my question.
How do I do it?
How can it be
How
done? How can it be done?
Whoa. Well, let me give you an example. I only do it one person at a time. so that my answer may not be helpful to you. But let me give you an example. A few years ago, I was asked to sit down with a young man who had spent about 5 to 6 years incarcerated. And we were sitting at a cafe, and he was not happy with talking to me at all, even though his friends had set it up. And we went back and forth a little. And he took off his cap to rub his hands through his hair, and a small picture fell out onto the table. And I asked him, "What's that?" He says, "This is a picture of my daughter. I carried this with me all through prison. So I guess I'm talking to you because my daughter is going to have better than my life." And then he slumped down and said, "What in the world do I need to do?" Point behind that, if you believe you want to be of this kind of service yourself, the opportunities to influence individual people will present, whether it's teaching at a Sunday school, being available to people who want to alter. And the primary advice to this young man was that take that picture and never, ever forget that picture, no matter how hard something seems, like taking a remedial English course, because it's not reading. It's none of the things on my list except the issue of faith. You wish to provide. You have something by which you intend to make major change. Therefore, for you, this particular person, reading is simply a tool. And the light bulb for him went on.
Well,
So I don't approach it societally. I approach it simply by case, who needs what they bring, how they want to talk through a problem of one thing or another. But I encourage everybody, if somebody sees you reading and you're a man who does read, to an extent, the people closest to you will follow the examples you set. Never underestimate your influence.
thank you.
If you want to ask questions, guys, come on.
Good evening, Dr. Poole.
No, just Mr. Poole.
Okay. Well, good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Antoinette Terry. My question was, as you mentioned earlier, in today's time, change is the only thing that's constant. How do you decide what books outside of your area of expertise that you should read to stay well informed, remembering that ignorance is the greatest enemy? How do you decide what outside of your area of expertise you should read?
That's a really good question. I may not be able to answer it. At my age, and I have entered the area of dinosaurs. I'm not in the tar pit, but I've begun the long march. For the last 30 years, I read what interests me. I will follow up on things that happen in the current news. I will follow up on a number of wide-reaching ideas and thoughts, because at this my particular age, I get to do that. Earlier, it was only a couple of things. I like poetry. I used to write this poetry, so I would do that periodically. The rest of it was contained with the work required to become a chief financial officer, to become a CEO. So it was very focused. I just did not shut things down, and I collected things that I hoped to get to be able to read. And ultimately, I got to read them.
Thank
So if you have that thirst for information, just collect it. When you can, read those things that interest you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Poole.
Sir, how are you?
Just fine, sir. I have three questions for you that will require just relatively short answers. And one of them is, first one is, what books were most important in your intellectual development, if you can pinpoint those?
Oh, there were lots.
I'm
Good
sure,
Lord.
I'm sure, but which ones stand out?
That wall. Some of the UN-sponsored original histories of Africa were profoundly influential. Being able to read a direct translation out of the four ancient languages of the New, Old, and books of the Apocrypha, what you would call the Bible, enormously influential. Actually sitting down and reading the history of how the Constitution of the United States was in fact written changed my perceptions, because I would grown up with, Ben Franklin, George Washington, all the usual suspects. But that's not how this thing was put together. And then some interesting Isaac Asimov, science fiction, the Foundation trilogy, had a great deal to do with the formation of my logic. A great deal to do. Who knew? I was just reading them and I was about 11 years old. Summer, between working. Fascinating. The Hari Seldon theories that underwrote Foundation, when confronted with too many options, do nothing, and the less optimal will eliminate themselves. Wow, I've applied that professionally for 40 years. Who knew? Stumbled on it. Next question, sir.
Next question is, what books would you recommend to help us understand the global system of concentrated wealth?
What books? Mm-hmm. Actually, it would tend more toward histories. There are a couple of books which explain the collisions, called A Collision of Cultures. The collision between the United States, not the United States, between Great Britain and China, which presaged by a good 30 years plus the Opium Wars and the destruction of the Great Summer Palace. But when you read The Collision of Cultures, things start to fall into place. Britain had tried for some 15 years in that era to get China to accept its technology in exchange for the massive debt that England owed China for tea and other goods. The then Chinese emperor utterly refused, would have no part of it. Within 30 years, opium became the currency, and it was enforced because the British were developing it in Burma and used it and forced it on the government of China. That ensued a number of other things, including some of the Opium Wars, which then led to further wars and the extreme xenophobia of China from that point forward. So if you're looking at wealth and how that works in conflict, you actually have to step backwards into history. The books that would define the current series of issues and difficulties have not yet been written. Lots of articles, but no books.
At what time frame were the Opium Wars?
They spanned a period of the very late 1700s, but specifically into the early 1800s.
All right. Third.
Oh, and the fall of the Ashanti Empire, the 90 years it took the British to crush the Empire of Gold. Very important book. Very, very important book.
What's that again, please?
The fall of the Ashanti Empire. It took the British 90 years to crush or stop the Ashanti Empire, and it couldn't. It only succeeded because of a dissolute and corrupt monarch, the last of the great kings.
Okay. Third question is, how did the 3% that we were talking about acquire their wealth, and what industries are they primarily involved in? I believe it's probably finance, energy, and technology. Is that correct?
Well, there's no wrong answer, but at this stage, they're involved in all levels of industries.
Right. And I've done some studying of.
Have been for many generations. This is not a slow accumulation.
Right, right. I've done some studying of the banking industry here in this country, and most of the things that we do, the American people are not aware are highly illegal. Just your mortgage alone is illegal from the day you sign to buy a house.
Oh, I agree
Credit
with
is
you.
illegal. Credit cards are illegal.
They're usury. They break the usury laws.
Right, right. It's illegal from the moment you sign for a house. Everything's illegal about that transaction. When you get a credit card, that whole thing is illegal. Yep. Okay.
So I'm not. Yep. For the general audience and yourself, sir, if you want to understand what you don't read, go home tonight and read 3 things. 1, your utility bill. 2, your phone bill. 3, your cable bill. Actually read those 3 documents and you will be up all night long. You will not sleep. These documents of what you have signed away as your rights probably border on the monstrous.
Right. And it's illegal for you to sign away your rights. Most people don't even know that.
Until you sign it.
Right.
Once you have signed.
I was talking to a lawyer yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I'm going through a situation with the property, and I asked her what about filing a UCC1, and this is an attorney who did not even know what UCC1 was. It's a Uniform Commercial Code. And like, how can you not even have heard of that, and you're supposed to be a lawyer, and you don't even know the laws that the United States is based on?
We can't have this discussion, or Dr. Ivanov will shoot both of us, but I teach part of this in my classes. I really get into that very specific issue in governance.
Well, please go ahead. I need to be educated more.
Well, no, we can't. Both of us can't get shot. So, by the professor. So.
Go ahead.
Please, my classmates need to know about what the Uniform Commercial Code is. Because their whole lives are governed by it, and they don't even know it.
I'm going to let you tell them. The basis that gives you the audience for the next class, ladies and gentlemen, is read the service bills I just told you to go home and read. If you read those, you will understand what you signed onto and what you signed away, because they're governed by 3 things. Are you ready? Number 1, the UCC. Dun, da, da, da. Number 2, the laws of agency. You have effectively assigned your rights to those providing services that are governed by the laws of agency. And 3rd, you have agreed to be bound by regulatory law, which is state and federal. You have agreed to do it. Only nobody told you that when you signed, which I think is kind of your issue. No one said once you sign this, we are your agents, period, into the discussion. Unless, of course, you don't want the service.
Alfred, coming up.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you're more than welcome.
Let's sit in this chair and speak into this mic.
The Phantom.
Good afternoon.
Good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I came in a little late, so I just got a brief synopsis of what your actual lecture was on. But I guess I understand that it's supposed to be about reading the knowledge and the knowledge that you have accumulated after reading a number of books. So my question to you, and just sitting over there mulling over what question I would ask would be,
Love it.
have you had an opportunity to sit down and think, what are some of the basic differences between W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington? I know you love that question.
I thought, oh, we don't have the time in the day to get into
Brief synopsis. Very brief.
First difference, I met Du Bois. So I'm old, so we can get that out the way. You know, I met him and got to listen to him. Both were so remarkably similar and separated by relatively little time. One believed deeply that you had to start exactly where you were. The other believed deeply in defining the future. And Du Bois was an elitist. We were very clear about this. He became a populist more toward the end of his life. What a remarkable man. What a fascinating to listen to. I never had the opportunity to listen to Booker T. Washington, who believed you start with where you are and become the best at it. I also believe without Washington, you could not have had a Du Bois. That's brief. That may be too brief, but that's brief. And don't let the books fool you, by the way. I like them. I study, but I didn't start out that way. Trust me on that one. Did I answer enough of your questions, sir?
Yeah. Here comes somebody else. One last question while they're coming.
Yes, sir.
Now, if given that synopsis, and then let's look in a little bit into the earlier time. Let's look at Elijah Muhammad and let's say Martin Luther King. And the question I'm going to ask you is not the differences. Do you think the spread of differences between Booker T and W.D. Du Bois is smaller, larger than the differences that was between Martin Luther and Elijah Muhammad?
Fascinating question.
Woo! I know.
Let me give you, just before this gracious lady starts, let me enliven your day. My grandfather and Elijah Muhammad were second cousins. I have a very different vantage point than most people.
Wow.
They were not that far apart between Elijah Muhammad on one side. Martin Luther King became wildly unpopular because he moved into criticizing the United States position on the entire world arena. And at only those points in time did he and Malcolm X begin to have curious things in common. So, not to bore this gracious lady sitting here waiting for.
No.
No, go ahead.
Oh, you
Please,
can
go
finish,
ahead.
sir. Oh, okay. Thank you for coming, sir. My question has nothing to do with books. I'm not a reader, but I'm doing better. And after listening to your 7 points, I've been inspired, and I know I can influence my son. But the one
Hey. See? Let's go ahead now.
But the one thing I do want to ask is that you're obviously successful in life, in your career. I just want to ask, what are some of the things that kept you driven and on the straight and narrow? Because it's not easy. And it's not something that just happens to you. It's something that you have to work really, really, really hard for. And how did you manage your surroundings, meaning the people?
Well, I did not start out at what you see on the screen, except for the bow tie at Sunday school. When I graduated from college, was the only time in my life I ever saw my father cry. And he said, and I quote, "I never thought I'd let you live to see this day." Unfortunately, my demise would have been sanctioned by the courts. He never would have served a day in jail. The difference for me is my parents never gave up. Even when they were treating me like Homer Simpson treats Bart Simpson with the hands around the throat, they never gave up. And at some strange point, my own light bulb went on. You can't give up. So I just worked. And then there were family issues. I had to see to it. The great turning point was I decided that my younger brother was on a deadly vortex downward. And one day he decided he was either going to go to jail or get killed or go to college. But there was no money. And I told him, and I don't know why I said it, I told him, we will figure it out. You are going. We will figure it out. I may have to go back to my less sanctioned ways to do it, but you're going. So the things that changed me were not some great, I'm going to be successful. There were things that happened which I could influence and I could only influence with an immediate decision. So I prayed on it. See, you're going. You're going to be dead. You're going to be in jail. If you don't go to school, you want to go to school, we'll figure it out. And then you said about making it happen. Just as you said a little earlier, your reading is more driven by the need to influence your son. There was no way in the world my baby brother was going to end up in the street or stay in the street once he made the personal decision to do something different. I had no idea how we were going to do it. No idea. But he had got a master's in engineering, so there you go. That's the genius in the family. So I say, folks, never underestimate your ability to make change, because you will see the opportunities as they cross your path. The decision is, will you do something? You want to change the world? Save a child. I don't mean take the child to McDonald's. I mean, get involved. Do something for one single person. You do that, you have effectively changed the world. You have altered life on planet Earth.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much.
Charles, any Who's coming? Who's coming?
Good afternoon. My
Good afternoon.
my name is Amanda, and
Yeah.
wondering, have you read this book by any chance? Might need to put it.
That's
Yeah.
one of the people that is on my list of unread powerful minds.
Ah, okay. So okay. So this is recommended for a leadership class. So by Dr. I.
Dr. I. Mm. And the question?
The question is it a good book or not, or is it going to help us with leadership?
Uh, the appropriate answer. Actually, yes, because it'll change your viewpoint. It doesn't replace other books. It doesn't replace. I like reading stories of Malcolm X myself. It doesn't replace that. But Deming was not popular inside the United States. Deming was wildly popular in Japan and other countries. Yes, Japan.
Okay.
And other places you get to read about a mind like Jay Forrester at MIT, a few other types of people. But Buckminster Fuller is a person that falls under this back in my era and generation. They did not stop in pursuing what they believed. They did not stop. Deming is a very good example of someone who simply did not stop, went from test to test to test, and began to build constants and then share them even when people did not want to listen. And you have in this modern Degrassi, the successor to Carl Sagan. And if you listen to what he says happened, because everyone said you can't be an astrophysicist and be black. The two are not compatible. Okay. I used to hear that. There are no black CFOs. Ha, ha, ha. There are now. A lot of them. But Degrassi Tyson now he is the director of the Hayden. He was told no chance on planet Earth. Got his own TV show. Ton of money. Speeches everywhere. And he was not supposed to succeed. In my mind, he is in the same category of publishing of ideas as Deming sits. Different fields. Same energy. Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, how's Dr. Ivanov doing over there?
I know. I'm hoping it doesn't affect my grade.
No, it will not, will it, Dr. I? Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions? Abdullah? Come up. Okay, we have two more questions. You want to come up?
Hello, my name is Abdullah.
Sir.
Yes, and I have a question about you mentioned something about the media and how it's makes you live in a dark place. I want to ask if the author can be similar to the media, but instead of speaking, he's writing his ideas.
An author is not the media. An author tells you he or she is writing their ideas. You know that when you pick up the book. You have the ability to read and stop and think and read and stop and think. The media is engaged in selling news, engaged in selling sensational news. Everything is so whittled down to sound bites that your ability to discern the truth is ruined. One network news is so bad is they will say something that is not true, it recant it in 2 days, and then 2 days later repeat the same thing that wasn't true. Distortions are probably sitting at the top of the list of why we are heading into global wars. Distortions. It is easy to steer a population by giving them something or someone to hate. All you have to do is beat the drum loud enough, and the general population following the media will stop questioning. Well, they must be right. This population or that population is either lazy or evil, and on it goes. Unless you read source material for yourself, it is so simple to fall into this. One of Hitler's top agents, top generals, said it's very easy. All you have to do to lead people into where you want them to go is trumpet patriotism and give them things to hate. Well, now we have modern world circa 2015, and people who want power use the same tactic. But the books are the books. And the first thing regimes tend to do anywhere is burn the books. Restrict the books. Say they shouldn't be used, whether it's in Europe, whether it's in Yemen, or whether it's in Texas, where they declare books that say, that don't have the party line about pro-Americans and say other cultures are good, should not be taught in schools. Wow. Now, we've been in that mode in the United States for 10 years. But lots of people are fighting against it. Lots of people. So there's no book burnings here yet. So you have a very good question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is this where you speak? Right here. Oh. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, ma'am. How are you?
Fine. How are you? I want to get back. My question is back to the concept of why read. I'm a novice reader. As a novice reader, how do you open up your mind to read a book you started reading and you put it down because it's so thick and you're like, I want to finish this book, but I'm not focused on it. And the book I was reading at the time was Langston Hughes' I Wander as I Wonder.
Oh.
I want to finish that book because it's by Langston Hughes, and my father always told me to read. But the book is huge. And I really want to finish the book, and I wanted your insight on how to read books that to open your mind and not be closed to reading so many different books about so many different topics.
Well, I have this may sound strange, but I developed a couple of tools, personal tools. They're called a box of paper clips, big ones. Those big books and I still don't really get along well. So now that we have big, fat, plastic book paper clips, I go in and I flip through a couple of pages and don't read it, and I paper clip them. And my objective is to clear all the pages in the paper clip, not try to read the book. I'm not good at that. Unless I have to read something on histories, I've got to get through the text. For me, the simple clip some things together in the paper clip actually got me through a number of books I wanted to read but couldn't start. It actually got me through the Bible the first time, and I was in my late 20s by the time I actually sat down and really read it. Every time I lifted this thing up, boom! I said, I don't want to read this. There's a Knicks game on. I don't want to do that. You know, I'd take paper clips and clip a few pages, and I found I could do that without being intimidated by the book. Now, I don't need to do that now, not as much now, but that's what I had to do. Break it visually into digestible little segments, and then I could get through it.
All right, thank you, sir. That helps.
Hope it works.
It will.
Don't use the matches now.
And we have, Professor Poole, we have last question as our time comes up. And go ahead.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Yvonne.
Ma'am,
How are you today?
I'm quite well, thank you.
Great,
Yourself?
thank you. I'm doing fabulous, thanks. I recently read that the literacy rate among graduating athletes was extremely high.
How about just graduates?
Oh, graduates. Maybe I just graduates. Maybe not the athletes. What do you think institutions of higher learning can do to alleviate this problem?
The literacy rate, the illiteracy rate was high?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, I know what happens at UDC. You get Dr. Ivanov, you know, and a Deming book, you know, and you graduate without it, you know. So I'm not. I'm gonna have to give you a subjective answer rather than an easy out. In classes, I used and still do lots of examples. Lots of real-world examples, constant flow of them, even down here at the University of Memphis, which is a big urban university. It's not campus out in the boondocks. It's in the city. By talking or having students do lots of small assignments on very current news, letting them choose the companies or organizations they want to analyze, including everything from neighborhood food banks all the way to the most amazing individual was the senior rabbi for a synagogue and school here in town. And you have that on one side, and you have charter schools on the other, and boy, did they get into a heck of a debate, and they actually wound up on the same side of the table against me. And I kept saying, how did I lose my position in this classroom? You know, this isn't right, you know. If you engage people where they are, like the gentleman who had been incarcerated for 6 years, to focus on the picture of his daughter. If you are constantly having your students bring live cases, how do we keep our church open, into the classroom? You as the instructor or the mentor, I have the textbook. I could reference the exact page where I want to steer them. But their minds are focused on solving the problem of how do we keep the neighborhood church open when I leave this classroom. And if there's a list in this book that's going to help me, which is my job to point out, yes, there is, it's on page 212, they will read that list, and then they'll read the pages in front of it and the pages behind it. I may never get them to read the whole book, but they know the book exists. And they will take that knowledge back to solve a problem that is very real.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh,
thank you so much. It was very enlightening.
Thank you all.
Professor Poole, thank you very much again, and yeah, stay well. Let's give another round of applause. I'll try to. Yeah, we have about 30 students here.
Oh, wow. I will send you tomorrow my list, Dr. Ivanov.
Sounds wonderful, and I will send a couple of books which I will incorporate into the syllabus.
I won't do that.
Thank you very much, Professor Poole. All the best.
Bye-bye.
See you.